Good evening, everyone. My name is Lori Oristano James, and I'm the president of the Board of Education for the Monticello Central School District. And welcome to tonight's general meeting, the public meeting. I just a little bit of quick clarification. This meeting is being recorded. We also will have a session in which public comment can be done. If you have any questions that you'd like to ask during that time, please send an email to our board clerk, Janet Montez, and you would send it at jmontes@k12mcsd.net. Again, that email is jmontes@k12mcsd.net. And we will read it into the record. If you are sending an email, please make sure that you not only send us your name, but your mailing address and your phone number as well, so that we have the contact information to get back to you accordingly. The other thing that I need to let everyone know is that we have all of our board members with us this evening, except for Kathleen Doherty. So normally she's here by phone, but she's not on this evening. So I just wanted to let people know. With that said, coming out of executive session, I just would like to, at this time, ask everybody to please rise for the pledge to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. I'd like to remind everybody, except for the device that you are currently on, please silence your electronic devices. Mute yourself if you are in the meeting and have access to that. And moving on from there, I'll entertain a motion to move the agenda to the table made by Mr. Groden, seconded by Ms. Jersey. Any discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? So ordered. Dr. Evans, any additions, deletions, or corrections to the agenda?
Yes, I have one addition, Madam President, and that would go under T11. And that would be based upon the recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools that the Board of Education creates the position of Technology Support Specialist.
Okay, anything else, Dr. Evans?
That is it.
Okay, I'll entertain a motion to adopt the agenda with the amendment made by Mr. Groden, seconded by Ms. Greco. Any discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? So ordered. Approval of the minutes of October 1st, 2020. I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes made by Ms. Greco, seconded by Mr. Crumley. Any discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? So ordered. School Board Appreciation. I'll turn that over to you, Dr. Evans.
Thank you, Ms. Oristano James. We have a resolution that expresses our profound appreciation for the volunteer work that you as school board members do at a minimum 2 nights a month, and in many cases a lot more than that. So I want to read the resolution into the record. Whereas each year, School Board Recognition Week is observed by more than 700 school boards in school districts throughout the Empire State, and whereas the men and women serving as members of school boards are dedicated to children, learning, and community, and devote many hours of service to elementary and secondary public education as they continually strive for improvement, excellence, and progress in education. And whereas the members of New York's local school boards respond to the educational needs of the communities they serve, and in doing so, these leaders help strengthen our state's educational system and improve future prospects for our children. And whereas during October 19th through the 23rd, 2020, special activities and programs will be held in communities across New York State in observance of School Board Recognition Week, and it is fitting to join in acknowledging the commitment and contributions of members of local school boards. Now, therefore, it is fitting to join in and acknowledge your commitment and contributions as members of the Monticello Central School District Board of Education. Was accepted on a motion made by.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We very much appreciate that. you know, it's the one elected position that people don't realize we don't get paid for. There's nothing, you know, our pay is periodically we get a nice note saying thank you, but our best notes come from when we see smiles on the faces like people like Kayla, and they walk across the stage and they graduate, and we see students being successful. That is our payment, and we love every minute of what we do. And people always say, you know, it's a thankless position, and we go, no, it's the most grateful position. It's not thankless at all. So we thank you very much for recognizing. We will not be holding any activities. Our activity is right here, right now. But I can tell you from working with this amazing group of people sitting around this table, not a table, but, you know, the Brady Bunch table here, that we, without a doubt, you know, this is hard work. There's a lot of reading to do. There's a lot of things to go by. It's not one day a week. And even in COVID time, there's stuff going on that we're attending and we're going and we're doing and we're running around. And you know, so even though you may not see us out and about in school buildings per se, you will hear, you know, in our reports that we're doing stuff and that we're out. And many a time, these members are on the phone with me as their president to make sure that, you know, we're asking the questions and things are being brought forward to the administration. So we thank you very much for that recognition. I, of course, screwed up my job as a school board president, and I missed C2, which was a moment of silence. So I apologize. I'm going to go back in the agenda to take care of that moment. I have 3 deaths that happened to our Monticello family this past 2 weeks that I'd like to make sure are entered into the record. The first is Joseph Wisniewski Jr. Joseph was a graduate of the class of 1999. The best way for me to describe him, because I did know him, he's a former student of mine. The best way to describe him was someone who always had a smile. When things were not going well or there were issues, he always smiled. His health was not good recently. And the one thing that I can continue to say is he always smiled. He always found the positive in what life brought, even though he was not well at the end. So our regards go out to, and our thoughts and prayers go out to his family and his friends and fellow graduates. The second one that I'd like to acknowledge is Kendra Shambly. Kendra was a graduate of the class of 1990. I remember Kendra slightly from high school. I was teaching in the middle school at the time, but I went up and did the high school shows. Kendra was somebody who had a personality that would shine to whomever she spoke with and whomever she spent time with. Watching some of the Facebook posts that I have seen brought back some fond memories of who she was as a person, who always felt that fairness, understanding, and care was the way of the world and should be the way of the world. So our thoughts go out to her and her family with regard to what I believe is an untimely death. So our third person lived to the ripe old age of 90. Coach Roach, known as Bucky Roach. He was a staple in this community. He started teaching in the school district in 1958. When he came to us, he had already been dubbed champion in both baseball and in tennis. He played and they tried to get him to play professionally, but his goal was to always coach. He didn't want to be a professional player. He was a coach and he loved to coach. And those of us who were his former students know very much so that was what his passion was. He was all about, how do I teach the next generation? And who he inspired and how he inspired was amazing. I like to say, and I shared with the board a little earlier, I started my career with my kindergarten teacher, Mrs. Roach. And I ended my career as a high school senior with Coach Roach as my phys ed teacher and my coach. So I was bookended by an amazing education family. And Coach Roach will be sorely missed because he just had that personality that inspired, whether it was in physical education or education in general. His mission was to coach, to be a teacher. And he inspired many, many in the field. So our hearts go out to him, his family. The love of his life, Gloria, is still alive. And we send our condolences. So at this time, for all three of those Monticello family members, we ask for a moment of silence. Thank you very much. And with that said, Kayla, spark our spirits. Tell us what's going on for your report, Ms. Cologne.
I have a bunch of great news. Last night during our college night, there was an amazing outcome. Over 50 people were helping students and families, parents and guardians, trying to manage application processes and financial aid. Guidance counselors have started their senior meetings, and this is just a one-on-one time with the senior to navigate their personal application. This is like screen sharing and really just figuring things out. So it's a lot easier and a lot less stress on our seniors. We're hoping to schedule another college night for all of the students that weren't able to go. There's a virtual open house next Thursday, which is October 22nd. All of the information is on our school website. We're planning and preparing for direct learning for students in performing arts and physical education, all socially distanced, all trying to make sure that everyone stays safe. And next week, we are piloting our mini bikes. So there will be certain desks that have bikes, like pedals at the bottom of them to promote physical well-being and learning, concentration. So it's kind of incorporating that exercise that we would normally get walking around the hallways, going from class to class, in our virtual setting for all of our hybrid students.
Thank you very much. Any questions from the board members? Okay, thank you so much for that report. We're glad to hear that there's some positive things and that going back to the physical education and the performing arts stuff with the, hands-on learning, that your voice was very heard at the last meeting and that there's a direction going for that. So there you go. You've already started representing your constituency very well. Congratulations on that.
Thank you.
Moving forward to, okay, so I've got to go there because to me, this is like watching wet paint dry. But the reality is, it is so important to what happens to our community. So, because it says good things and bad things as to how our financials are in our school district. So with that, I'm turning this over to Dr. Evans or to Mrs. Sala.
I will turn it over to Mr. Arias, who will be presenting our external audit report for the fiscal year 2019-20. Welcome, Mr. Arias.
Hello. Do I have permissions to share my screen, or is the host going to share?
Janet, can you engineer that, please?
I can share it. If you want to share it, I think Lori as host has to give you rights to share it.
You can share it if you got it there. You can share it also.
Okay, I'll pull it up.
That's easier. Just share it, and then we'll just go from there.
Okay. Oh, I need sharing again. I need to be able to do it. I think you're on mute, Lori. I think you were saying something.
I just made you co-host. You should be able to, Janet.
Me? Janet,
Yep.
me? Okay, thanks.
Okay, so I'll start the presentation. Again, my name is Andrew Arias with Cooper Arias. This is your external audit. Briefly, the first slide is just briefly talking about what we do in the audit. It's a financial statement audit. We do look at your financials, which is your numbers and notes. We have to look at your compliance with laws and regulations, and we also have to determine what kind of reliance we can put on your internal controls. We do risk assessments as part of the audit, also looking at high and low risk areas, certain transaction classes that may have a lot more transactions have a higher risk, as certain other transactions may have a lower risk. And we use all that information to sort of plan our audit and determine what our procedures will be. Federal single audit is the internal controls and compliance over your major federal programs. So basically what we're doing is we're looking at whatever the program is that year that we consider to be major. And I'll talk a little bit about that a little later. And we look at your internal controls and compliance specifically over those programs. So it's sort of a second audit within the audit. And then at the end, we give an opinion on your fair presentation of the financial statements to an outside user. So these are your financials. Our opinion pretty much just says whether they're fairly presented. So someone, a taxpayer, someone looks at these financials, would they be misled by the financials? So I just want to start off briefly with the COVID-19 issues, a little bit, some sort of hurdles we had to go through this year, and everybody had to make accommodations this year because of what we were dealing with. So the timing of the audit was delayed due to the shutdowns. Just when we were ready to get into the schools and start our preliminary work, is pretty much was the height of the shutdowns. And the schools were busy figuring out how to still function under those shutdowns. You had to figure out how to get your payroll done, how to disperse checks, things like that. So we understood that it was a tough time. So a lot of the time we would have spent before the audit doing preliminary work, we had to do later when we came in to do the regular audit. So we sort of had just the timing of what we did and when we did it changed. I will say once we got in to do the audit into the district and the CBO, the work went smoothly. The audit went like a normal audit would go. Again, it was just delayed a little bit because of the shutdown. Once we were in there, did all the protocols. There was certain protocols, the CBO, certain protocols at the district offices we had to follow, but it all went very smoothly, I think. In this year, there's no new GASB standards, basically all because of COVID-19. All the implementation dates have been delayed at least 1 year. So what that means is your financial statements will look the same as they have in previous years. There's no changes to them. And in July of 2020, New York State began withholding 20% on certain types of state aid, which I'm sure you're all aware of. For the Monticello School District, a total of $439,185 in aid was withheld from state aid receivables that had to do with your fiscal 2020 revenues in your general fund. So you would have money still coming to you for, say, excess cost aid or BOCES aid. When that money came, New York State took the 20% cut out of it. And how we handled it was we did not recognize the revenue in 2020, basically because really when you're going to receive that money is out of the hands of the district. The district has no control of that at this point. It's really up to whether New York State gets the aid they're looking for from the federal government, and they'll make that ultimate determination as to whether you ever get the money. So we didn't want to put a revenue in there and show it in your fund balance as if you have the money if we're not sure you're going to get it. So there is a note disclosure in the financial statements 10D that gives you a little detail about that. But that was $439,000 that reduced your general fund revenues because of what the state withheld due to that 20% withholdings. Starting with your general fund, your total fund balance for the year increased $1.02 million. You had a planned decrease of $4.74 million through appropriated fund balance. So basically in your 2020 budget, you planned on using $4.74 million. Your fund balance increased 1.02. So you outperformed the budget by $5.78 million. And when looking at these numbers, I always put the percentages because that's really the benchmark you want to look at. Whole dollars really don't mean much because of different size budgets, different size school districts. You want to look at it as a percentage of your budget. And also when you're looking at some of these numbers, just be aware that a lot of these numbers, because of the COVID shutdown, a lot of numbers are going to be skewed at the end of the year in terms of expenses and revenues and things like that. But just take that into account when you're looking at them. Your expenses were $4.69 million under budget. That's about 5% of your total budget. And your revenues are $1 million over budget, which is a little over 1%. Now that was mainly due to your BOCES refund, which is over $1 million over budget. And that's very common. The BOCES refunds always come in over budget. And your state aid came in under budget. But again, that was because of that 20% withheld. If you put that 400 and change back into your state aid, it would not have been under budget. but because it was not recognized in 2020, you show your state aid as being under budget. So a combination of those things come out to about 1.09 million over budget. In the financial statements, you'll see there's a revenue detail and expenditure detail that breaks down the individual line items if you want to look line by line to see which lines are over budget and under budget and by how much, and you can look for that. In your general fund, you had a net increase in reserves of $167,000. The only activity was in your tax cert reserve. There was a net adjustment of $99,000. That has to do with removing old money out of the tax cert reserve, putting new money into your tax cert reserve for existing tax cert cases. And you also earned $68,000 in interest income on all of your reserve balances. There was no other activity. Currently, you have a balance of $14.6 million in your reserves for the district. However, your capital reserves make up over 10 million of that balance. So when you're looking at that reserve balance of 14 million, most of that is in capital reserves, which really has to be spent by the voters have to approve a project to spend that money. So your other expenses are a little over $4 million. I mean, your other reserves are a little over $4 million. So the district does have sort of other reserves available to be funded. So if you're looking in the future to fund reserves, you certainly have, ERS reserves, TRS reserves, workers' comp, that either have not been funded yet or really are not funded at high levels. You certainly could fund them more. So it's just something to think about as you move forward if you wanted to put some more money into those reserves. Your appropriated fund balance decreased 2.04 million, and you currently have $2.7 million in appropriated fund balance. That's the portion that goes towards next year's budget. And I remember years ago, it used to be a very large number. I think at one point it was like 6 million. And it's nice to see that number come down. You don't want to have to be plugging such a big gap in your budget by appropriating such large amounts of fund balance, $5 or $6 million. Because what happens is at some point, if your fund balance starts going down, you no longer have that 5 or 6 million to plug that hole. So ideally, what you're trying to do is have a smaller number as possible as an appropriated fund balance. So you had a big cut this year, and that's nice to see. Your unassigned fund balance increased 2.91 million, and that was mainly due to the large decrease in appropriated fund balance. So again, if you have a large fund balance and you appropriate a lot towards the next year's budget, that brings down your unassigned fund balance. If you don't appropriate as much, it brings it up. It's just how you use your fund balance. And your unassigned fund balance is currently 10.09 of your subsequent year's budgeted expenditures. That exceeds the 4% statutory limit, but the district has always sort of exceeded that 4%. That's certainly up to the board as to where you feel you want to be with that fund balance. You have been pretty consistent over the last few years, at a low of 6.8 up to 10.09. So you've sort of fluctuated right in that area there with your fund balance. But like I mentioned, really the district, if you really, were intent on getting that fund balance down to 4, 5, 6%, you could do it by funding your reserves, which some districts would do. But sometimes if you feel you're okay, with being over the 4%, that's where you want to be. That's certainly up to the board of where you want to be with fund balance. Just continue to monitor the fund balance. I mean, years back, it was very high. The district opened up some capital reserves and was able to bring it back down, and now it's been pretty consistent moving forward. And that's just looking at the relationship between your restricted and your total fund balance. As you can see, your total fund balance has stayed pretty consistent over the last 5 years. You have been sort of funding your restricted fund balance. Again, a lot of that was putting money into capital reserves. That's what's going into that restricted fund balance. That sort of shows you the relationship between your total fund balance and how much of that is made up of restricted fund balance. And this is a relationship between unassigned fund balance and appropriated. And the reason I show this relationship, as I like to talk, is you don't want those two amounts to be too close together. Ideally, if your unassigned fund balance and your appropriated fund balance are getting very close like they were in 2019, that could potentially create what we call a budget hole. That if your budget is exactly perfect and you use that 4.74 million, you almost don't have enough to put towards next year's budget. Ideally, you'd like to see it more like it is this year, where your unassigned fund balance is pretty much larger than what you're appropriating the fund balance. In theory, that means you can appropriate your fund balance 4 times before you would use up your unassigned fund balance. And that's sort of where you're looking at that relationship as to how you use your fund balance, sort of like in a savings account. If you have a $10,000 in your bank account and you're going to spend $2,500 a year, you have 4 years before you have to worry about using it all up, as opposed to using it all in 1 year if you appropriate too much of that fund balance. And this is just a trend of the last 5 years. This gives you your expenditure budget in millions. So you sort of see your trends there in terms of your percentage under budget for your general fund. And again, that's one of the trends the state controller looks at. They want to see how close you're getting to your budget. And again, I keep going back to, some of the older years, several years back, the district would be 8 or 9% off on the budget. And that's when your fund balance got very large. And that's basically what will happen when you're missing your budget by large amounts, your fund balance gets very large. And then that's when your unassigned fund balance gets large. And again, it's something where if the state controller comes in, they'll say you're not using accurate budgets. It really is a good trend line to look at for board members as you get ready for the budget each year. If you have a close budget, then you're doing your budget based on what the needs are. If you're missing your budget by 10%, for instance, 2 years in a row, then you might think to yourself, well, why do we keep increasing if we're missing by 10%? But as long as your budgets are coming in pretty close to where you want them to be, that's what you want to just keep monitoring as a board member. And this is just the revenue side of the budget. Again, not as much attention is given to revenues, but certainly it's important also. That will drive your fund balance up. If your revenues are coming in way over budget on your revenues, that will drive your fund balance up. But again, you can see you've been pretty close on your revenue side of the budget as well. So again, just I mentioned, the state control is putting that scrutiny on budget to actual variance. So it is something that you want to look at when they come in. If that's an area they're looking at, they do change what they're looking at. Sometimes they look at fund balance, sometimes they look at budgeting. But if they're looking at budgeting, that's what they're going to look at. They're going to see how accurate your budgets are and if they're missing, why they're missing. So just monitor those trends. But just again, just keep in mind that when you're looking at fiscal 2020 and now fiscal 2021, it's going to be kind of difficult to really get an idea how those budgets are going to go from year to year, because we really don't know yet what's going to happen with your state aid coming in from New York State, and what's going to happen with expenses, whether you're going to get some expenses that might decrease because of COVID-related issues, that you're not providing a service, and some that might increase because of the COVID issues. So just in the next 2 years, it might be a little bit more difficult to sort of compare from year to year because they're going to be very unusual years. Hopefully, by the end of this fiscal year, we get through this and we can sort of be back to normal going into your 2022 budget season. But right now, there's a sort of an unknown out there as to what's going to happen. Your school lunch fund, you had an operating surplus of $117,000. You don't subsidize that in your general fund, so your school lunch fund is self-sufficient. You have a current assigned fund balance of $569,000, which is about 37% of annual expenses. That's not something that's a statutory limit, but the SED will recommend retaining a maximum of 30% annual expenditures of fund balance. So once you get over that 30%, which you are now, you should start looking about either using the excess money for some school lunch expenses, adjusting your budget accordingly, because state ed will be sending a letter saying that you should do something in your school lunch fund with the excess fund balance. Again, it's not a statutory like the 4% is, but it is something as a board member you should be looking at if your school lunch fund continues to go up as to what we can do with it. Your debt service fund has a current balance of $1.01 million. You had $72,000 in premiums earned on current year debt issued, no expenditures for the current year. So that is available for your future debt service expenses to help offset debt service costs in your general fund. Capital projects fund, a little over $5 million was expended on the $54 million voter approved project. And there was also $201,000 expended on fitness equipment, where you had a installment purchase contract to purchase fitness equipment. So on page 67 of the report, you'll see the capital project schedule. That schedule will show you all your projects, how they were funded, what the progress is, what the expenses are to date. You can sort of see all of the individual ongoing projects for the district. Single audit over federal programs. I mentioned earlier, that's the internal controls and compliance over your major federal programs. So we do risk assessments so that different programs get tested from year to year. They don't want us just testing the same program every year. So we look at things like the size of the program, whether we've had findings in past years, whether it's a complex program, it's a common program. A lot of assessments we look at to determine if they're high or low risk. So if you test the program 1 year and you have no findings and it's a pretty straightforward program, we can call it low risk, and then you can skip it next year and test different programs. The only requirement is that major programs, which are over $750,000, they have to be tested at least once every 3 years. So we test your Title I program. We have no findings. You may be perfect on Title I, but every 3 years we do have to test it again. They don't let us pass on those for more than 2 years. This year we looked at your child nutrition programs. There was just some minor clerical errors in the meal counts. Overall, my staff was in there, so the record keeping was very good. Just to give you an idea, there was a 16 meal variance in a sample of over 18,000 meals served in the sampling we looked at, and we found a variance of 16 meals, which was just a small dollar amount. And only one of the variances occurred during the non-COVID period. So during the COVID period, where it was a little bit hectic, but again, we feel we're looking at a sample of 18,000 and we find 16 meal variance. That's a very good sample. But overall, the record keeping was very good. And my staff has seen some of the various school lunch programs, and they feel that your record keeping of those meals is very good in that program. So we don't consider this anything major. No significant deficiencies or material non-compliance noted, and you get a clean opinion on your federal programs. It's an unmodified opinion. And your federal single audit, the reports have already been filed. They're up there at the Federal Audit Clearinghouse. They've been certified by myself and by Lisa, and they've already been uploaded. Management letter overall and total controls are very good. No significant issues. We test your major transaction classes. We look at disbursements, receipts, payroll, procurement. That's all part of our assessment of how good your internal controls are and how much work we have to do. Nothing major. Any minor issues we may have come up with, we do discuss with the audit committee. So even though things may not be a written management letter comment, we like to discuss them with the audit committee members. So if it comes up again next year or the year after, at some point we may say, okay, we want to put it in the management letter because it hasn't been addressed. And I think one of those issues this year in the audit has to do with the extra classroom activities. And it's not a serious issue. It's one we find in a lot of extra classroom. We had it as a verbal comment. It has to do with just, having better supporting documentation in the extra classroom activities. And again, we do want to point out, we're trying to, teach the children that are in those extra classroom activities that the purpose of what they're doing is to learn how to run a business. So we tell them that they have to have profit and loss reports, and they have to have better support for cash receipts, and the students have to sign off on every transaction. It's because you want them to learn, how to be running a business, and it's all really a learning experience. So we did discuss that with the audit committee. It's in the management letter. In addition, Margaret contacts all the advisors, the people in charge of that, and lets them know, what issues we may have had in the extra classroom activities, so they'll follow up on it. But again, nothing major. And then overall, you got an unmodified opinion on your financial statements. That's pretty much everything is in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. All of the required note disclosures are in there. So it's a clean opinion on your financial statements. And I believe that's already also been sent up to State Ed. So if anybody has any questions on the actual audit report or anything in this brief presentation.
Any questions, Ms. Jersey?
So on the appropriated fund balance on the unassigned, the percentage should be about 25 to 30 would be a healthy percentage compared to each other?
What, the 25 to 30? In
Yeah.
terms of how much, if you have like 4 times as much, you have to just look at it, how many times can you appropriate that fund balance before you're going to use up your unassigned fund balance. Now, I will also point out that when you're looking at your unassigned fund balance, you have to consider what kind of reserves you have also. Because if you start using up your unassigned fund balance, you then can sort of offset some of that by using reserves. So like, for instance, you have some reserves like workers' comp and ERS, you have those expenses every year. So if you're having a bad year, you can sort of use your reserve. That would offset the use of that unassigned fund balance. So and that's why I say, like, if you fund some of your reserves even more, your ERS you can put more in, your TRS you can put in. Those are expenses you have every year. So it's not like the money's going to be sitting there and you're not going to get to use it. You're always going to get a chance to use it because you have those expenses every year. But I would say, it's always different. It's really just, it's not really, I don't really have a rule of thumb, but I look at it. Yeah, if you have about 4 times, your unassigned fund balance is 4 times what you're appropriating. I think it gives you time that if you start using up your fund balance, it gives you time to make adjustments. If they're the same, if you have 100,000 appropriated and 100,000 fund balance, and the first year the whole 100,000 goes, you have no fund balance left, you don't have time to really adapt and adjust. Giving yourself about 4 years, it gives you time to make the necessary adjustments in the budget.
Any other questions around the table? Thank you, Andrew. We very much appreciate you coming in.
Thank you.
And you don't make it like it's wet paint drying. So
believe me, I've heard that before. I know my daughter tells me it's like wet paint drying, so I know. So
we thank you, and Ms. Fela, being able to get a great report like that on our school finances is in no short part to the work that you and your staff do on a daily basis, and in guiding our administrative team to where they need to go so that we are still in a healthy position for our community. So we thank you for that as well.
Yeah, and I would like to second that. I work mainly with Lisa and Chris, and we go in there and they have everything ready for us, anything we need. I know my staff works with other people in the district offices, and they have no problems in getting what they need and talking to people, but I do think you have a very strong business office.
Thank you. Thank you. We're very proud of them. So any other comments from school board members? Okay. Thank you very much, Andrew. We appreciate
Thank
it.
you. Good night, all.
Good night. Moving forward from there, Mr. Cromley, do you have anything you want to say?
I move that we approve the consent agenda as a group, G1 through M2.
Do I have a second for that? Made by Ms. Holmes. Second. Any discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? So ordered. Moving on from there, board roundtable. Do I have any board members who have anything for roundtable? Mr. Groden? You need to unmute yourself.
I attended, I bopped into Chase School. I flitted about the different open house invitations that I got in my inbox, and some people were like, who's that? Then it was quick that teachers were like, oh, I know him. That's Mr. Groden. And then I also attended last night the college information that was long and extensive, like Kayla said, and I have to second what she said because it was fun-filled and informative, and it was cool. The tie-in is that it's really nice having had Ms. Vans as my class advisor, and then to see her running, back in the day, and then to see her running that again, it was great. So love to see the connections and the interactions with staff and with the public. In these times, I've noticed that the teachers are just bending over backwards to establish the connections that have been stolen from us, and they are trying to kindle in such a way, shape or fashion that is a true testament to Monty Pride, and I'm extremely proud.
Thank you. Anybody else roundtable? Okay, I do have a couple of things. I did attend also, I popped into the college night very briefly last night. I lost internet service for about 20 minutes of it. So it was kind of interesting to watch technology go down for no reason. What I saw was very meaningful. And I think, Kayla, you sharing the fact of doing another so that more students have access is a wonderful idea. So I think that would be very beneficial all around. I attended along with Dr. Evans. We had a small meeting of the Hub Committee just to discuss where our future is, what we're doing as far as when can we reopen in time of COVID. Right now, what's being looked at is potentially a date sometime in January. As you well know, we're utilizing that building as an alternate learning site for remote learning for our faculty. So we had to utilize that spot, and therefore not being able to utilize it as much as we were doing for the hub. So we do want to thank Marty Calavito and Tom Bosket, who are doing yeoman's work. It's still getting out to the community and still staying in touch with many of the students who were involved in those programs, and reaching out to other member agencies as we continue to grow that and shift what we're doing there. And we have to now, because we got $200,000 from Senator Metzger, and we got money from, Assemblywoman Gunther to make things happen there for our community. So we look for more positive things. I just want to remind everybody that the library vote did occur for the Monticello Library, the Crawford Library. The budget did pass. So I know that our librarians utilize and have relationships with all of our libraries in our area, the one in Wurtsboro, the one in Monticello, et cetera. So, congratulations on them having a successful budget pass. Today, I spent from noon until 6:24 on Zoom for New York State Council of Educators Association's meeting. It was quite impactful. Discussion centered around a number of different things. One that I want to bring to the attention of the board is we did hear from State Ed with regard to teacher shortages around the state. What State Ed is doing with regard to them. It was amazing to hear from the people around the room. Ironically, what are some of the positions that are difficult to find? Well, your science teachers, specifically those specialty areas such as chemistry and physics, special education, more so in the secondary schools than the elementary schools, and the other shortage that we know so well in foreign languages. So languages other than English, and having conversation around what they're doing, not only in time of COVID to help alleviate those concerns, but what could be looked at down the road. Things such as you know, for a student teacher to receive certification, they have to do a thing called an Edtpa, which is basically a online portfolio of what they do, and they're doing it during their student teaching versus doing it prior to them getting permanent certification. So the workload is so enormous that a lot of colleges are finding that students are dropping out because the workload is just too much during the student teaching time to actually be successful. So there's conversation around that. There was dialogue also around the fact of school districts not supporting people or student teachers to come in, and that's what's causing some of the shortage, because they have teachers that need to find placements, and that those placements are becoming difficult to find, and more so now during the time of COVID. I did give a shout out and said, well, Monticello Central School District, we still take student teachers. So just anyone who's listening who is a teacher and you're interested in student teachers, please make sure that we're aware that you are interested, because the only way we get the future generation is to create the future generation of quality teachers. So that was good. The other thing was the Arburn conversation. Arburn is in different areas, and that's specific to our ENL students. And I did have one question that I wanted to ask, because I wanted to make sure that I had an answer, or we were looking for it. I'm looking through my notes. I apologize. But I wanted, if we could please find out, Dr. Evans, and you may even know the answer, do we have the seal of biliteracy available to our graduating seniors? So we do. Okay. So I just want you to know that we're one of 58 school districts in the state that offer that. And that is so incredible to our ENL students. I wasn't sure. I thought we did. But when I saw that the number of districts in the state that actually offer it, that little Monticello offers it, which allows our students who have the capabilities of putting on their high school diplomas the ability that they have, the multi-language capacity and things of that nature. It makes them more sellable in a job market, makes them more sellable in a college market, makes them more sellable in going into the services. So it really is a leg up when we have students who have the capability of having that on their diplomas. So I'm glad to hear that. And when I report out the next time at NICEA, I'm going to let them know that our district is one of those 58, because that says a lot. That's good. Kudos to us and our team for doing that. So that's my report out for board roundtable. Moving from there, going into reports from our directors. Does anyone have any questions with regard to the reports? Okay, moving on from there, policy committee memo. I'm going to turn this over to you, Dr. Evans.
Yes, thank you, Ms. Oristano James. So I have two significant policy updates for the board tonight. One I will leave for my report later in the program. But the initial one is, you may recall that at the last meeting, I believe we discussed changes that New York State had in its records retention schedule. And we've identified 7 district policies or regulations that would require minor technical corrections, changing policy language from ED1 to LGS1. In other words, recognizing the new records retention schedule put out by the state of New York. So that is the essence of the memo that I've shared with the board, and that will be found in action item T9, where there is a board resolution that we received from New York State School Boards Association, and our legal counsel approved that we can use instead of doing the full policy reading and rereading process for this minor change. So that's
Thank you.
item T9.
Thank you. Any questions for Dr. Evans on that? Okay, then moving on from there, we had no correspondence outcomes for this particular meeting. Capital project updates. So Chris, you're on. Woo-hoo.
Hey, hello
Welcome.
everyone. Good to see everybody again. It's been a little while. So here to report on 2 things. I guess we'll jump into the infamous tennis courts now. I think I have sharing abilities here.
Yes, I gave you sharing ability.
Perfect. So really what you're looking at right now, can everyone see that?
Yes.
Okay, so this is just a quick little aerial image of where we're talking about putting the tennis courts. So right outside the high school, as you enter, the campus, really past the bus garage, where this road splits, there's a patch of grass and a couple trees over here that, out of all the spaces, it's fairly somewhat limited space that has the proximity to the high school for a quick and easy walk for any given phys ed class. But it also has, some open space so that we could fit an appropriate amount of courts. And so this where comes in where we were originally trying to fit 6 courts into this space. And I'll show you a kind of a concept plan that we put together. It's fairly rough. So everyone sees this one now too, the white sheet here. So this is, we went out there, we did survey, we did topography, surveying shots. We got all the existing conditions, basically. We got the tree locations, the different grades and any utilities that are out there. And you can see that just to give you a frame of context here, that this is the road that goes down to the parking lot in front of kind of the gym area, or that big brick wall that says Monticello High School. And then this road is still Breaky Ave that goes up around to the middle school and KLR. So you'll see that we're kind of digging into, with some of the offsets and the clearances that we do need around the tennis courts, that it's really tight. Another thing that you need to do with tennis courts is that they need to be north-south facing. So one might say, hey, can we rotate these to fit them? They would fit a little bit better, but as far as some of the sports standards that we do have to abide by for any given, hosting events and having legit, games that are, technically to the specifications of any given, sports authority there, that it's always good to have the tennis courts facing, north-south oriented. And then you'll see that we have, like a 21-foot buffer from where you would serve at to the fence. And then any separation between courts or between the baseline and the fence is about 12 feet. So once you get the size of the court, plus all that kind of clearance space, these tennis courts get fairly large, plus the fencing. And you'll notice that in in green, you'll see existing grade. So down here we're at 1561 and up here 1577. So that's a rough 16-foot grade going up. So as we get farther into the hill, when you're building these, the more you have to dig out of the hill, the more expensive it becomes and the more retaining walls that you need. So the unfortunate thing, we can't fit 6 unless we wanted to start manipulating roadways, which is going to cause a jump in cost, obviously. So I do have some rough construction numbers. So if we wanted to go with 5 courts, that would include some retaining walls, but not as much as 6, obviously. So the 5-court option is roughly $650,000, and that's in construction costs. And then a 4-court option would be roughly $525,000. So, I'm bringing this, and I talked to Dr. Evans about this and Steve Lewis a little bit. We wanted to bring it to the board's attention that we need to come to the conclusion before we really dig into the design development and the construction documents of this project, and prior to State Education Department submission, that now's the time to decide on how many courts to move forward with, and kind of have that open conversation and bring this to the table. And I'm here to answer any questions as they may come up. Just wanted to get that out there to the crew and see your thoughts on what you think would be, you have some of the costs there, so you can make the decision a little bit more, with a little bit more information. So yeah, open up to the floor, or however you guys want to handle it. I'm here to kind of pass along the technical information and tell you kind of the background of where we got here. But I know that tennis courts have been talked about in the district for a little while, so it's an important thing both for the programmatic aspect of phys ed, but also community based thing as well.
So Chris, could you do me a favor and stop sharing your screen so I can see everybody's faces, because they become a little, thank you.
Sure.
So are there any questions around this? Okay, so Mr. Crumley first.
So first, I understand that Stephen and Matt's input is good, but I'm kind of interested in Kurt's input, our athletic director. In terms of if we're having a match, how many courts should we really have to be able to hold a match in a fluid manner, and the kids can actually play to what they're used to playing, and they're not either getting strung out in terms of we don't have enough courts that everybody has to wait. I was kind of interested in that information. And then the other information I was interested in is hopefully the kids do great and we have a lot of support from the community and people want to come and watch the kids play. What are the accommodations for some sort of spectator area or something so people could actually watch? Even if it was built into a retaining wall into like an amphitheater type of deal or something like that, or just even if it was the aluminum bleachers or something to that effect, but something so people can actually watch either their children or maybe we'll have a state champion playing that everybody and their mother from 5 counties comes to watch Susan play. But those are my 2 concerns about the tennis courts, is that athletically speaking, we have enough to do it the right way. And then B, that we're doing it the right ways and people will be interested to come and watch our students do their thing. And then even if it was being used as a classroom setting, the seating could also be used as a seating area for a class to maybe get a small lecture on whatever might be happening for the students to be learning while they're outside. Instead of just standing around in a corner and everybody trying to sneak on their phone or whatever the case may be.
So Dr. Evans, I know that you can answer part of that for sure.
Sure. Yep, I can speak to the questions regarding discussions with Mr. Budenhagen, and he's been involved in the process as well. In speaking with him over the past several weeks, he's informed me that previously, when our tennis players played at either De Hoyos or Emerald Green, there were only 4 courts in those locations. So historically, those teams have used 4 courts. So I asked him, I said, so what's the preferred number? He said 4 is better than 0 and 5 is better than 4. He also assured me that or informed me relative to physical education. I asked him, so how many students does he think could get on there for during a class period? And he believes at least or comfortably 6 students per court in a class. So think of like a 3-on-3 type activity. Today I met with Ms. Gupta, the tennis coach and high school phys ed teacher. She assured me her experience has been more than that. But as Chris demonstrated, if we go beyond 5 courts in this scenario at this location, it would, we'd have to get into the roadways and that would incur additional costs. So Mr. Budenhagen informed me, that 4 or 5 would be as good, if not better than what we currently are doing. And I'll defer the spectator question to Chris.
Yeah, sure. I mean, we could definitely look into that. I think that's a great question, great comment to incorporate, especially for either spectators or learning space. I think that's, something that we can accommodate. And, once we do iron down the number of courts that we do want to move forward with, our next step is to get into design development. And I will relay that information to my civil teams, because this is kind of a civil engineering design. So I could, let them know about that, about the desire and need to have that in. And, that's something I think we could, to be a little budget conscious and have some budget flexibility. We do these things called bid alternates, which I think a lot of you are familiar with, that we could potentially have the spectator area as a bid alternate. That way you kind of have, okay, here's the cost for 5 courts, let's say, and then here's the additional cost for the spectator area, however it may be, a bleachers or built into the hill. And then that way you have the option to, okay, let's pick to move forward with that or not.
Well, in God's honest truth, I've never been to a high school tennis match, and I'm not sure how they lay out when a bus comes from Goshen and the kids are going to play and there's 3 doubles matches and a few singles matches. The people that aren't playing got to be someplace. And if they had some, bleachers or something to that effect, you have someplace to go to. Our present ball fields are kind of they're ball fields, but they're pretty poor in like the dugout situation and things of that nature. And people don't like coming to them because the dugouts are so horrendous. I'm not saying I want to go crazy or anything like that, but at the same time, I want to have something that's appropriate. And I understand the bid alternate. And even if the bid alternate was like, okay, we're going to pour an extra 20 by 30 slab. And for right now, yeah, we'll have aluminum bleachers, but we're all set up to maybe do a $50,000 project and put in really nice bleachers in the future. And we don't have to go back in and excavate on the other side of the courts and, incur a $300,000 thing to build a $50,000 bleacher. You know what I'm saying? I'd rather have good bones that I can build off of than not think about that at all. And 5 years down the road, the board is maybe moved around a little bit, but we're handing something off to them that is basically an impossibility to happen without redoing half of the stuff or driving an excavator over a court, which is going to completely screw the pooch. And that's kind of what I'm getting at. I just want to make sure that we're planning accordingly for the future. And even if we don't go crazy right now and do a large, nice bleacher, we're set up in the future to do a nicer bleacher, and we don't have to take something apart to then do that. You know what I'm saying?
So Chris, this board has with regard to this, because we know what we really need, and what we needed was $110 million and it didn't happen. That's the reality. So all of this through everything that we've been discussing, what the long-term vision is, and where that long-term vision needs to head. So to me, what I hear Mr. Crumley saying is that that what we want to make sure of in the design work, and I know that this was conversation in one of our sub meetings in which Mr. Budenhagen had shared with us very clearly other alternative ways that court could be used for educational purposes. So I think what I'm hearing Mr. Crumley say is within the design work, when you go to, the civils department and everything you need to do to make sure that they understand the vision, no matter what the cost analysis comes out, we want to know that at the very, very end, that we have the capability to say, okay, we couldn't do it this year, but next year we've got this extra money here, or we want to, there is a bond to put that out, and, whatever the case may be. The district for so long has not, which is why we needed $110 million. The district for so long did not constantly put out bonding to fix and repair and to do. But part of the issue is that no matter what they could fix and repair and redo, things were not done with the long-term vision. So I hear Mr. Crumley saying, can you just concentrate on that when we're looking at this design work as well?
Well, and then obviously with the 4 and 5, I'd love to have 5, but sometimes it does come down to dollars and cents. I mean, I'd love to give our kids 5, but if it means 5 without having any sort of spectator area at all, or geographically from your layout of 6, there's really not a lot of space to do that. I want to make sure that we're taking care of both aspects of it. It's great that the kids need a place to play, but you do kind of have to provide a place for people to watch and for parents to come, and the other team and everything else is kind of.
So Dr. Evans, can you and/or Mrs. Fela give us the cost breakdown that we were seeing, or maybe Chris, is that the cost breakdown that we're seeing with regard to the 4 versus 5 versus 6? Because 6,
Sure.
To me, I can't even imagine that you could even come up with a 6, because there's so much inroad into other areas of that. To me, that line that I saw hits that upper driveway.
Yeah, the 6 was not cost out because of the road work that would be required to do that. Is that correct, Chris?
That is correct. Yeah, we would, if you guys wanted us to entertain that, we would put together a concept plan of that and actually engage the construction manager on getting an estimate for that, because that's a little out of our wheelhouse. I mean, that's what they're for, is providing numbers. Our firm obviously does some cost estimating. We do tennis courts a lot, and we actually do roadways a lot, but it was my civil team and the guy working on this named George, actually out of the Poughkeepsie office. He's done a ton of tennis courts. That's his wheelhouse. That's why he got me numbers fairly quickly on these options. Has done retaining walls and all that stuff before. If we're going to go to the 6 option, reworking roadways, we have to engage a couple of our other, colleagues for different design, and it just becomes a more layered process. So we would like a little bit of a checks and balances on that price before we gave it to anybody, so.
So there's questions around the room, but I do want to get the answer out with regard to the finances. So Dr. Evans, if you could do that, because that may answer some other people's questions.
Yes. So you heard Chris before mention that 4 courts would be approximately $525,000. 5 courts would be approximately $650,000, according to Clark Patterson Lee's estimates. The board may recall that several years ago, I think maybe 5 years ago now, the community authorized the board to expend $650,000 to construct tennis courts. That was the actual resolution and referendum that passed. Some of that money was spent initially to do initial design work. However, those bids, as I've been told, those bids came in dramatically over budget. And then as the new project that's currently underway at the high school, as that was approved and started to, we broke ground on that, the tennis courts were kind of set aside. However, there is still, I'm going to say, approximately $560,000, Ms. Fela, is that correct?
Yeah, it's pretty close to that number.
From the original authorization. And then any more monies on top of that $560,000 that the board would want to use could be drawn down out of the current capital project. Is that correct, Ms. Fela?
Yes, because we included that language in the referendum for the 54 million because of the history of the tennis courts, knowing that it was 650, that wasn't gonna be enough. We had spent a little bit, so we knew we had to come up with some more money. So that is in the was in the resolution that was approved for the 54. So we can use some of that. We don't have to tap in too much. So it's like 125,000 maybe, and it gets it done. So I think we could do it within the 54.
Do the 5 courts or 4 courts plus a spectator area if that's within that price structure.
Okay. So I want people to know that I actually saw their hands. So we're going to go first to Ms. Cologne, then to Ms. Holmes, then to Mr. Groden, then to Ms. Sharoff. So that's going to be the order because that's how I saw the hands go up. So Ms. Cologne, you're on first.
Just because I've walked down that hill a couple times and it's pretty steep. How is that gonna happen? Like, are we digging in? Are we building up? Like, how are they gonna be flat?
Yeah, that's a good question. We'd be digging into the hill, basically. So we would have to remove a lot of dirt to make it flat. So it's about a 16-foot grade difference or incline there. It is steep, and it gets steeper as you go up it. So yeah, and then what we'd put in its place is either, depending on how many courts, with 4 courts, we would probably do a retaining wall / new grading to alleviate the cost for the retaining wall. But if we do 5 courts or 6, then really that retaining wall gets a little larger, and then you have to put together some fall protection and things like that. So, and on the flip side, the reason why I believe that the courts came in way over budget last time was because the opposite. It was actually had to bring in a lot of dirt. And, believe it or not, dirt is super expensive because it needs to be clean and well packable and all that type of stuff. And they were doing it the opposite way, where they had to add dirt plus do a retaining wall to make it flat. So here we're cutting. At the old one, they were filling, and cutting is a little more cost effective than filling. So
I think
One other question is like time frame wise. So I'm a senior, right? And I know a lot of seniors that play tennis. So around, like, let's say we were to do the 4 courts with seating or the 5, when would that, when a roundabout would that be finished?
Those courts would roughly be finished the end of next summer. So yeah, we have to go through a submission process. So right now we're writing schematic design, we get into design development, then we create construction documents, where basically is a big set of documents that are, the directions, in a way, if you will, for any given contractor to build this. And so we submit that to the state education department. They review it. Their review time is about 4 to 6 weeks. We get comments back, reply to those comments, and they ultimately give us a building permit. And then we put it out to bid, which is basically putting it out to the public for any given contractor to put a price to it. And then we have a bid opening and then award the contract to the low qualified bidder. So there's a lot of steps there, but I've done it a million times and I'm familiar with the process. So we're pretty confident that we can get everything done basically by next summer.
So Kayla, when people say, I don't understand why it's taking so long. If you are a municipal entity such as a village, a town, a county, whatever, your board decides we're going to spend this money. They make the decision, doesn't have to go out to the taxpayers. They make the decision they're going to spend this money because they're going to fix this or do that or whatever. They go to their building codes person and says, are we a code? And they go, yeah, thumbs up. Boom, they start building. In schools, there's all these other hoops that have to be jumped through. So first of all, we have to make sure we have voter approval. Then we have to make sure that the design is okay with us. Then it goes to state ed, which takes time. And then Chris explained it from there. So yes, it does sound like it takes forever. How come it takes forever? It's because we're held to as, they used to say about, the Hebrew national hot dogs were held to a higher standard. We just are as a school district. So if anybody is to ask that, you now have the answer to that, okay? Terrific.
Thank you.
So moving from there, Ms. Holmes?
My questions revolve around cost, which has been partially answered. The 600, the price that you just gave us for the construction cost, does that include the design cost? So what would the design cost be in addition to the 525 or the 650?
The design cost, I believe, let me just double check here. Bear with me here. Okay. Almost there. Okay, so this was already approved by the board, and the design cost for our services from schematic design to construction administration, which would be the management of everything at the end, was $63,000.
Okay, so then we're looking at a little, so that changes our total cost by 63,000.
Yeah, that's a good point to bring up. The fact that we're talking, with the numbers I gave you before, between the 525 and 650 are construction costs. So those are the costs that we're talking about when we get those bids in from the contractors. And then on top of that is your soft costs that you're going to have to pay between, our fees, attorney's fees, insurance, things of that nature.
Right. Okay. So, and so then my other question about cost is, the difference between 4 and 5 courts is 125,000. I'm assuming that the cost to add a decent spectator other person section is less than that, probably. Would you assume that?
Yeah, I would assume that, definitely, because you just don't need the real estate that you need for a court. It's just, you got these 4 or 5 or 6 puzzle pieces that are really struggling to fit on this area. Whereas the spectator sport, like Mr. Crumley said, it doesn't have to be huge, but it has to be accommodating to, a group of people, whether it's, visiting students and also parents that want to watch. So I would confidently say that a spectator area would not be an extra 125,000. I think we can get creative in where we put it. We could have, and then as we dig into design development, this is not the only time you guys get to comment and speak about this design. As we get farther down the road, there'd be different milestone periods that we would share the development of the plan and the designs for additional comments. The location of the spectators area would be, that would have some cost implications. If it's on a relatively flat area, that would be less than if we were to build it into the hill with the retaining wall. All good thoughts and options of like this brainstorming that we're doing, but to answer your question long-windedly, no, that I don't think it would be it's not going to be that costly to add a spectator area.
One more question. With 5 courts, do you think that there's adequate room for a pretty decent spectator or classroom area?
I think so. I think we would be able to 5 or 4 accommodate it.
Okay, then I'm done. Who's ever next can go.
Okay, so Mr. Groden.
Hi, Chris. With the stacking, there's minus using plexiglass and having a 3 on top of 3. If we were to implement I love the design idea of having, like Mr. Crumley said, about having a amphitheater type thing. I'm thinking of Bethel Woods precisely where they have their outdoor court and it's just the built into the wall. The cost breakdown that we had Ms. Holmes talk about, that it was like 130,000, but if we had the 6, we're getting another court for 100,000. If we have the structure, like Mr. Conley said, so long as we have the framework, we can do that, build upon it later. As long as we have the layout and have that already carved out, no pun intended. But if we already have it, the trees are already coming down. We're trying to, capacity maximization is just like a doctor's office. It's like, how many people can you get in? How much can we fit? Yes, like Ms. James said, that, there's also science classrooms that could be doing their rocket launches, et cetera, and other physics that they could do on tennis courts. So we're trying to make it like that Swiss Army knife, that area, utilitarian. So if we get more area, we can always do, but we can't, that next step. Don't the prices of having the number of courts drop the more that we add?
Normally they would. That you're kind of referring to the economy of scale, right? If you order 100 windows, it's cheaper than ordering 25. But with this, it's counterintuitive, because the bigger we expand it, the more we have to cut into that hill, and the more we cut into that hill, the more material and labor that we're going to need to get the job done. So in this case, it's the more courts you add, the more expensive the unit cost of each court gets. So.
Okay.
Okay, Mrs. Sheriff.
So Kathleen and I were board trustees at the time the board decided to put in the tennis courts and put the proposition out to the voters. Our intention was really looking toward the future and community use as well. And our intention was to build 6 courts, but in a different location. And so that bid we got was based on that other location, et cetera. But I feel strongly that 5 courts are important going forward. I think, as other trustees have mentioned, we can get ready and set to add on a spectator section later on just by bonding it out in a small project. But I would hate to trade a tennis court that kids would be playing on to save a few pennies or to make a spectacular spectator area.
Okay, thank you. And Ms. Colon, your last question.
So going back to the design cost, so you said it was 63,000. Is that for 6 courts, or is it just like for 4? Like, what is that regarding?
The design, Kayla, is the design based upon the instruction that this board will now give to Chris as to what he's going to come back to us with. So the design, it doesn't matter how many courts they're designing, it's here's the space, create the design. So that price will not fluctuate based upon what our choice is on how many courts. What changes is the cost of making that happen. But the design work is all part of that number. Okay. So at this point, we've asked a lot of questions and we've gone around. I think what, Chris, what you're looking for tonight is some direction as to 4, 5, 6, and what the options would be there. I know that we've driven home the message that we obviously want spectator information or a spectator space. If it's not in this initial component of it, at least that within the design work, that's thought of, so that down the road that could be something added. So with that said, I'd like to get a feel of the people sitting around the table. So I think the best way for us to do this is put this out as a conversation of 4, 5, or 6, just because it's not a vote, it's a direction. So can I see, let's start with people who want to go with the 4. Okay, people who want to go 5. 1, 2, 3, 4. Can you keep your hands up because I've got to see the, thank you. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So you got 6 people for the 5 and for the 6. Todd, are you doing 5 or 6?
I was thinking of 6. I wanted to ask instead of digging into the hill, I was just thinking of the sports center that's down in Chester. What would a 3-court, 2-story steel building be? Would that be way out of the ballpark of a cost that we're looking at?
Tim's laughing. I'm just telling
I know he is.
Probably is majorly laughing, and he knows this stuff better than any of us. So he's in a whole fit of laughter over here. You know, he's in that top screen where Marsha is. I saw it right away.
So Chris, it would be cost prohibitive to have it and do 3 and 3. Okay.
Yep.
So I'll go with 5. I'll go with the pleasure of everybody else.
So, Mr. Crumley?
Kind of just going with the design function. I assume there'd be some sort of lighting out there. And would there either be piping or wireless capabilities out to the courts for scorekeeping and things of that nature, even if it was for in the future, that we at least had the capabilities, whether it be wireless or hardwired comm lines back to the building to get the old interwebs out there or data so we could utilize different things, even if it was classroom or scorekeeping for a match, to have those capabilities out on the court. And lighting, I don't know tennis enough to know how late they play or if that comes in for matches, but at least for security purposes in the evenings, to keep people from maybe using that as a tapestry for their art or anything of that nature. That's just the last little design thing I had.
So Chris, the direction that I'm hearing from the board is to go with the 5 with the understanding of making sure that within that design work, we have some sort of capability for people who can come and watch, spectators area, et cetera. And that we're hearing very clearly from our athletic director, 4 would be fine, 5 would be better. But he is not of the opinion that 6 is a necessity, is what we're hearing. Am I correct on that, Dr. Evans? Oh.
Yeah, that's what I'm hearing as well.
Okay. So, so we go in that direction and we move forward. So I know you're not done, Chris, so I'm turning it back over to you.
Nope, moving on. So thank you for everyone for that. I appreciate the brainstorming there and getting to that decision. That's going to help us move forward accordingly. So next on my agenda is an update on the bus garage and high school renovation project, as we slated as task 2 in this $54 million project. So all is going pretty well. I mean, we got the place torn up pretty good. So the demolition is, we're in the trenches right now. So, as you drive by, you could probably see the shape of the building. So we're getting close to a tipping point where things are going to start moving in a direction of rebuilding instead of just tearing down. But with a building that's so old that, there's a lot to it, a lot of, things that are coming up. One thing that did come up that I want to bring to the board's attention is as far as the plumbing contract of this project. What was discovered within the science wing back to the boiler room was that the hot and cold water main line, so the piping that provides hot and cold water to any given sink and drinking fountain or anything that provides water within the science wing, those main lines within the original construction documents that were bid out were slated to stay. So those lines were above the ceiling and insulated, and our documentation that we had previously we didn't exactly know the full status or the condition of those pipes. So upon demolition and removal of the ceilings, of some of the insulation, and having everything opened up at this point, it was discovered that these water lines, the hot and cold water lines, are galvanized pipe with lead solder fittings. So as everyone probably knows, that there was some lead testing that was done throughout New York State and also obviously in Monticello. Typically, mostly any sort of positive lead test that does come up with any given fixture or sink is usually at the fixture itself through the different fittings that the fixture has. And a lot of that, so all those fixtures within that science wing have been removed and we're replacing them with new fixtures. But there was some brainstorming done between myself, my CPL team, the facilities director Steve Lewis, the CM LaChase, and the contractor SNL Plumbing, that it'd be a good idea, since we have all this area opened up already, to replace this hot and cold water main piping within this project. So this would be all new main piping for the science wing back to the boiler room. And this would be a true change order to the contract. So this would be additional cost to the plumbing engineer or plumbing contractor contract. So just as a refresher, any given construction project that's over $500,000 and we're over that is subject to Wick's law. So we have to bring it to 4 different primes. So general construction, plumbing, electrical, and mechanical. So the existing plumbing contract right now is I can get you the numbers on that one. Let's see here. Just bear with me here. Sorry. There we go. So the contract amount right now is $1,362,000. The proposed change to replace the hot and cold water piping would be $78,000. So it'd be $78,740. So it'd be an additional $78,000 and change, which would increase it to $1,440,740 within the plumbing contract itself. We do have an allowance within the plumbing contract that's built into that of about $80,000. The $80,000 allowance is used for unforeseen items that do come up that happen in any given renovation that you do. But with this, we wanted to make this a true change order if we're going to move forward with it, because we didn't want to exhaust that allowance. And then that way, everything that would come up between, a 2,000 or 4,000 change that may happen once you open up a wall or what have you, to have to keep on doing technical change orders. So we still have money allocated in the allowance, but this one, we wanted to come to the board, explain the situation. One of the I guess, components of this is that it wasn't in the original construction documents, so we didn't pay for it during bid. We would, the scope wasn't there within the bid, so paying for it now is additional scope, additional money. So whether you paid for it during bid or paid for it now, you would still be paying for it. With true, full disclosure here, when you do have it incorporated in the bid, the contractors have their pencil sharpened a little bit. You get a little bit more of a competitive price to do work. But there's also that kind of balance that happens where we already have the contractors mobilized. We already have the insurance and bonds put in place. The general contractor has the place all opened up. Everything's accessible now. So I recommend, and it does make sense moving forward at this point, to replace these water main pipes for $78,000 and change. I just, obviously I'm here to explain it. And, since obviously always a tough conversation to have if you got to spend more money. But if anybody has any questions or want to discuss anything, that's what I'm here for. That's my job to make sure that, you guys understand all this.
So, and Chris, the bottom line is we knew going into this that that was a building that's almost as old as I am. And I'm falling apart. And except the difference is that there was a blueprint for me, like I came out of my mom's womb and there was kind of like a blueprint. She had 10 fingers, 10 toes, that sort of a thing. And what we do know about that particular building is that right from the get-go of the initial build back in 1967, when it started until it finally, was finished and finalized, that the building was built backwards and shortcuts were taken and no documentation was done and Band-Aid approaches were done at the time. And because of it, future boards have to handle what should have been handled way back when. And this board, as you've heard me say before, we'd rather do it right and have the dialogue of what would the future vision look like than to have what's coming up with regard to any of these change orders. So with that said, Mr. Groden and then Mr. Crumley.
So the lead levels, that's based on the first draw, correct? When it is that they're opened up in the first 30 seconds, as is the water's been sitting there. Isn't that usually where we get the lead from like you said, the failing fixtures or the?
I would believe so. So I would have to refer to Steve Lewis on some of this, but I know that, working with other districts, having, other areas or other districts test positive for lead, it typically happens at the fixture. So the metal valves and different fittings that you have at the fixture, from when it goes to your, from your piping to, that's usually where the positive tests come from. The fact that we have in the mains a galvanized pipe with lead solder fittings, there's a potential there.
But not as high, right?
No, not as high. Definitely not. And
okay. Thanks.
Yep.
And just to be clear, I'm sorry, Tim. Earlier this week, I had a conversation with Ms. Fela about, the lead testing that has been going on in the district, as it has across many public schools in the state. And according to Ms. Fela, anything that would have been identified was mitigated and then, fixed. But again, this would not have been picked up on if it's deep in the main. It would have been more at the fixture.
Mr. Crumley?
I assume this main line also feeds the 200 wing bathrooms, water fountains, things of that nature?
Yep, that's correct. Yep.
What are you replacing it with?
Copper.
Why?
Because that's the industry code compliance standard these days.
There's not a large enough PEX line that you can run down there?
There could be. That's kind of, I rely on my plumbing engineers, and then also the contractor S&L plumbing and the CM to kind of vet some of those design making decisions. So the copper line is what we had come up with, and that's the pricing reflects that.
Yeah, that's kind of where I was getting at. I assume they would go pro press. They wouldn't be soldering.
Well, yeah. So you could still do pro press with, I believe, with. I'd have to double check that. Yeah, let me get back to you, Tim.
Well, I understand the trade-off between the fittings and the and the labor. I mean, you're talking about 30 seconds of crimp as compared to 15 minutes of solder joint, but you're also going up to $500, $600 valves instead of, $100 valves and things of that nature.
Right. Right.
I was kind of hoping that the industry's coming away that you could run a 3-inch PEX line down and tee off of it rather than running a 2-inch copper line down or whatever the case may be.
Right.
You also have a little more freeze protection and things of that nature. I know households now, it's fairly standard. Houses don't even see copper anymore except in wiring. I wasn't sure if it had made it as far to the industrial side of things to be able to use that capability in this type of circumstance.
Yeah, I know the district uses it in some areas, and I'm part of this project, part of the HVAC contract. We are using it with some of that. Let me get back. That's not my wheelhouse, but I should be able to get those answers to you, and I could send those along to Dr. Evans, and he could forward it to you, because I know that that type of system is being utilized elsewhere. And I'll make sure to get the details on exactly the materials used for this change order and get those.
And I assume the change order also just replaced valves where they had valves in the past?
So here, this would be all new valves as well. So it's kind of a comprehensive replacement. So basically, if we do move forward with this, that, within the science wing and back to the boiler room, there would be all new piping and valves. So.
And your standard cutoffs underneath sinks and things of that nature. And
Yep. And then from the main to the different fixtures, whether it's a drinking fountain, whether it's a sink in the science room, or eye wash stations and showers for the different chemistry rooms and things like that. So all those units, I apologize. I'm at the office and there's a train going by, so I apologize for any background noise. But any of those areas have all new. It's all new. So basically, it would be kind of closing the loop on old and new. And some of this is, it's in hindsight, I wish it was in the project. I really do. And we didn't have to have this conversation right now, but it's that balance between, where do you stop the demo and where do you salvage and where do you provide new with the different budget concerns and trying.
The only reason I ask about the valve thing is because sometimes back in the day, they would give you like one valve when it probably would have been optimal to maybe have two valves. And that's something I'd kind of leave up to Mr. Lewis, who probably has a better grasp of the building than I have.
Yep.
But a good way to save money on plumbing is to not put valves in. Right. Valves cost money. Valves cost money for install. They cost more money than straight pipe. So I'm of the nature that, if the system could be cut in half someplace or whatever the case, or Mr. Lewis said, it'd be really handy dandy if we had a valve here, so we could shut off half the system rather than the whole system, is kind of what I'm getting at.
Yeah, I believe that there's a valve at every classroom. So
I'm more concerned about the material issue than the valve issue.
Right.
So Chris, you'll be able to get back to Dr. Evans with regard to that, and then we'll have an answer, because we should be good with regard to what that looks like.
Sure.
I know that Ms. Colon had a question, and then Mr. Groden.
So internally, I mean, like, all of this is kind of like in underground / like in the building. Externally, are these like water fountains still going to be like standard water fountains, or are they going to be the water bottle reusable fountains? Or is that not included in this at all?
No, they would be the bottle fill water fountains.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Yep.
And Mr. Groden?
We had gone with a direction about the tennis courts. I would second and love to echo what Mr. Crumley said. The difference between PEX and copper, that would be a direction I would thoroughly want to see if we could explore that option.
So we've definitely, because we're getting long-winded on this with Chris. So Chris already said that he will absolutely give information to Dr. Evans, and that we will, because the material that we're going to use is not as important as let's get this change order in so that the work can start to be done. So that we have a little bit of time for that, if I'm correct, Chris, to make that determination.
Yeah. We have some, it's a balance there. We got to keep these guys moving as far as the contractors, working. But yeah, I owe you guys an answer to that. So I will definitely find that out tomorrow and get it to you in a timely manner so that you could decide appropriately. But I guess in a way, the silver lining here is that, worst case scenario would be, roughly $78,000 for this change. So, and I just want to add that, real quick, I know that we are getting long-winded here, but it's there's a lot of gray here. It's not just a black and white thing, but that overall with some of the initial estimates that we did have LaChase do, I think we hit a really sweet spot with bidding during the pandemic when the COVID, first hit and all that, I feel like, the contractors that bid on this project, and there was a lot of them that bid because work was a little unknown. So we did get some competitive pricing. We are, within budget and under the different estimates. So, not to dismiss $78,000, but in the scheme of things, it's, percentage wise, it's not a huge hit. So.
Okay, thank you. Is there anything else you want to share with us?
Yeah. So, I mean, overall, I hate to, these conversations are tough conversations because, I'm the bearer of some bad news, but overall, the project's going really well. We have a great team. I want to just, plant the seed that there are other plumbing issues that have been discovered. One of them is that the sanitary lines, so this is when, the water goes down the drain and out the building. So in the science classrooms, the current sanitary lines that were, again, in the construction documents to stay and remain are glass piping, literally glass. And the reason why they are glass is because back in the day, they used more toxic chemicals within the science spaces. And, it was a corrosive kind of resistant material, glass that is. So that's currently in place, and that would then go to a central neutralization tank to neutralize the acid, and then off to the normal sanitary systems outside of the school. Now, the chemicals that are used in science rooms aren't as toxic, and any neutralization happens at each fixture. So the need for a neutralization tank is not needed anymore, but the glass piping is in rough shape. We snaked it. It's bowing. It's broken in areas. It's leaking. So that's another thing that right now, again, it's kind of the same situation as far as the water mains. But after that, I think, knock on wood, I think we're in a good shape. There's the plumbing contract again. With these two things, I will be back to explain a little bit more in detail once we find out more. We do have some cost to potentially replace that sanitary piping. But that truly is underground under the slab. So there would be some trenching needed and things of that nature. So just wanted to let you guys know that I'll be back to explain that one. But, first things first, talking about the water main. But again, it's an old tough building, but we're getting there. Every day we're chipping away and making great progress. I just wanted to, that's what I'm here for, to just relay the information, good or bad or indifferent. It's something that just happens as you open up these old buildings. So
There's no bad information, Chris. We know that building is old. This board has, trust me, 95% of this board has been through that building as a student. We know where the problems are because they were problems even as old as I am. We knew that they were going to be issues when we were, going through and doing this. And it's what happens when people were not watching back in the building days of that, because had it been built correctly, there would have been a pool and the front would have been the back and everything would have been, the windows wouldn't be to the inside, they'd be to the outside. It just simple things.
Yeah.
But it didn't happen that way. And it wound up being, all kinds of issues back then, but we can't go back and fix what was. All we can do is move forward from here. So we thank you for everything with regard to that. And Chris will come back to us with more information on that. So with that said, thank you, Chris, for attending tonight.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thank you, Chris.
Yep.
Thanks, Chris.
It's good seeing everybody. Have a great night.
You
You
too.
too. Stay well.
All right. Take care.
So speaking of moving forward, how about a path forward, Dr. Evans?
Certainly, Ms. Oristano James. Thank you. So the big news on our path forward is that Cook Elementary School has reopened for in-person instruction. It did that on Tuesday. Monday was Columbus Day holiday, so there was no school or classes on Monday. And we welcomed the second grade to Cook Elementary School. So it's been their first days this week as well. And that got off to a wonderful restart. And it was nice to see kids excited and back in school there. And also the New York State Department of Health recently issued what they're calling a toolkit, but it is a series of flow charts that are very informative for parents, staff members, and students alike about when and how they should either not come to school or come to school, or if they are sick or quarantined, what they need to produce or show to be allowed back in the schools. So we do have a link on our website under our FAQ page for COVID-19. And also, if you go to the New York State Department of Health's website and search for toolkit, you should be able to find it there. And we're also, just this week, we started to begin workouts for athletics. Those aren't full-blown practices, those are workouts. And on Monday, I'll be continuing discussions with our principals and directors about expanding upon other after-school or extracurricular activities. However, we're still very cautious about how we go about expanding those offerings and opportunities because we want to do it right and we want to do it in a health and safe way. So more to come on those. But that's our path forward at the moment.
Thank you very much. Upcoming events. I'll come back to you in a second, Ms. Cologne. Give me a second. Upcoming events. So everything is listed there, and you see what's going on with regard to that. And then moving down into community events, you see that spaghetti dinner is still there. So, you know, even if you're not going to eat the spaghetti dinner, you know, reach out to, you know, Billy Waterton is a good one to reach out to for that one. And you want to make a donation, please make sure that you touch base, because those scouting activities and things like that, especially during COVID, are so important. Kayla, what was it that you needed to add or wanted to add?
I have a question. Is there a deadline to switch cohorts? I know a lot of students either want to transfer into hybrid learning or out of hybrid learning. Is there a deadline for that?
There's not a deadline. However, we are following up with students who have not been attending regularly. If they've signed up for in-person instruction and they're not attending in-person instruction regularly, they are being notified that they need to attend, or else they might be pushed into cohort D. However, switching into in-person instruction ultimately depends on capacity. So there are some grade levels throughout our district where we are at complete capacity for either in-person instruction or remote instruction. So in some schools, depending on those numbers, we've stopped allowing switches at this point. We are informing parents of that as they make calls. And the best way for a parent to find out if he or she is interested in doing that is to call the school principal directly or email the principal. Is that correct, Dr. Ole-Marks?
Okay. So moving on from there, we've got questions and comments from the public. I just need to do our normal statement because I know that we have some. The Board of Education recognizes the value of public comment on educational issues and matters of public interest. In order to permit the fair and orderly expression of public comment, the following rules shall govern and will be administered by the presiding officer. Please note that the first public comment period is 45 minutes, maximum duration. I'll read it faster than that, I promise, the 4 of them that there are. At the beginning of the period, and the last one is 15-minute maximum at the end of the meeting. Either period may be extended by majority vote of the board. Neither public comment period is a time for public discussion. If necessary, the community member will be contacted for follow-up. So if you wish to speak, you place your name, the email address. So those of you who have sent in questions and we're about to go to them, please, again, I remind you to please make sure for our record that we do have your email address and your mailing address and phone number, because we don't have a regular sign-up sheet and we need that for our records. So I know that our clerk has already reached back out to you to ask for that. So please make sure that we have that. It won't stop us from reading it tonight, but please make sure that that's part of what you do. So I will state your name and I will give the information with regard to that. Comment is limited to 3 minutes or less per speaker. I read pretty quickly, so we shouldn't have any problems with that. And everything else is pretty much going, because I'm reading it, is self-evident. So just so that people in the public understand, questions, there may be answers tonight, there may not be answers tonight, but whatever cannot be answered tonight, no matter what, will be put into our agenda at our next meeting with regard to answers and everything, so that everybody hears the answers. It's not just going back to the person with the question. And with that said, let me just switch over to my email and I will start the questions. This is a question from Jamie Kahn. I hope I'm saying your name correctly. Let me just grab a fast swig of water here. I want to first preface my statement with I am all in capital letters for sports and serve as a board member for my town's Little League. I am fully aware that these are unprecedented times. With that being said, regarding athletics, as I drove past the high school yesterday, I saw some soccer players playing, practicing not at 12 feet apart. What are the details of what I saw after school hours? Are the players using the building, lockers, etc.? If so, why are we working parents not permitted to have before and after school programs at our home school where our children are for the day and not at a separate facility? If the concern reasoning is a janitorial time constraint, why would I see prior to March 2020, the janitorial crew cleaning after hours well into the evening until 6 or 7 p.m.? The children are in the building less this go around, and more cleaning is taking place, we are told, which is great. However, it does not make me think of the past. Why wasn't this always the way? Deep cleaning. Please help me to understand. We really need before and after care. We opt in my family for Cohort D for one reason of not having before and after care. The other reasons are more personal. In wanting instruction for more than 2 days a week. The bus doesn't come right to my home. This gets into the specifics of use. So they will be answered by Dr. Evans with regard to your last paragraph. And she closes by saying, I just want to understand and need a better, clearer vision on this as an advocate and voice for my children. Thank you for your time. So we thank you, Jamie, for that question. I believe that Dr. Evans did speak to expanding program and that's starting and that's coming. But I'm sure that Dr. Evans will get back to you personally with a little more detail on that. Moving on to our next letter. Give me a second. I just have to switch them around. This one comes from Melissa Benjamin. She writes, is there a plan for the before and after school programs that have been suspended at this time? These programs not running is hurting families. Working parents who relied on this program last year and in years prior are currently struggling to secure appropriate programs for their children that will allow them to continue to provide for their families. The Sullivan County Child Care Council can confirm that there are just not enough appropriate child care providers to meet the needs of the family in the areas. It was my understanding that the before and after school programs are not running because of limitations being put on facilities used to allow for appropriate cleaning and sanitizing. With athletic programs beginning soon, won't they be using the facilities to do so? Are facilities being used for Nesson Cultural Arts program? I am greatly concerned, and I am hoping the district is able to find a plan to get the before and after school programs up and running soon. This program is one of many that the students and families desperately need. So Ms. Benjamin, I would say the same thing that Dr. Evans did address that actually in his presentation with regard to our path forward plan, and that, you know, things are coming in legs by leg by leg, and he will address your concerns directly as well as reporting out on this information. Moving on to our next letter. This comes, excuse me one moment. This comes from Darren and Jen Mitchell. Hold on a second, I gotta get to where, okay. They just wanted to comment regarding the tennis courts. Every other school that Monticello Tennis plays against has at least 6 courts. Why would we build brand new inadequate facilities that would not accommodate team play or class instruction? So I think that was answered in our dialogue. I know your email came in prior to that. Our understanding from our athletic director is that 5 would accommodate what the needs would be for any of those things. And that this board made clear that we were looking for the ability to expand and do things down the road as well. So I will turn that to Dr. Evans to give further clarification on that. And moving to our last email. This is from Paul Soto. And also regarding the tennis courts, my name is Paul Soto, and I am a Monticello High School senior. I've been playing tennis since my sophomore year, and I believe 4 tennis courts is just not enough. If you think about it, there are 4 singles matches and 3 doubles matches, and that is only for varsity. Junior varsity still has matches to play too. How late will we have to wait to play? If you are going to put so much money into building tennis courts, wouldn't it be smart to build 6 courts that will benefit the team instead of 4 just because it's less money? Please think your decision through before you waste taxpayers' money and not benefit the teams in any way. Thank you, Paul Soto. So Paul, again, I will refer that back to Dr. Evans to get back to you with regard to that. Again, yours came in before the decision was made by the board and full conversation was done. Again, we have an athletic director who was questioned, and he believed strongly that 4 were not enough, 5 would be better. But he did not, according to what Dr. Evans was saying, felt that there was a need for us to actually have 6. So that would be a number that we have to take a look at when we're looking at budgeting. You know, we all would love the Rolls Royces of things, but the reality is even within our own home, we have to budget accordingly. And I think that this board made very clear that if we could make more and do more, we would. And right now, the design work will be done around that concept. So Dr. Evans, do you have anything you'd like to add with that, or are you going to just respond back in post?
Well, just to clarify what was already stated earlier, that in order to do 6 courts, that would require significantly more work. Not only, you know, the first proposal that our architect showed how that would impact the roadway around that area. And then you heard Mr. Groden ask about an enclosed facility, and that too would incur some additional costs above and beyond what the voters authorized 5 years ago and what's currently available within the scope of the project that's currently underway. So it was a pretty hearty discussion by the board about an hour ago about this, and my understanding is that the board gave the authorization for 5 courts, not 4. So that's, I think, reasonable given the constraints on the project.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Evans. Ms. Montez, did anything else come in while I was reading?
Nothing.
Okay, thank you very much. Moving on from there to superintendent's report, Dr. Evans.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you. To briefly kind of highlight some of the pieces of my report. As mentioned before, it is open house season. You heard Mr. Groden talk about some of the open house sessions he attended. I'm sure others of you have as well as parents. Last week, I was privileged to jump in some classrooms at Chase Elementary School and Rutherford Elementary School, and I'm grateful for the teachers and the work they're doing there, not only in inviting me, but also walking parents through the Teams platform, which can be pretty intensive. And I really appreciate the work of our staff in the learning they've done over the past 6 months, as well as getting our students and families on board with those programs. So, and again, you heard Ms. Colon talk about the high school open houses next week. I would encourage parents, if they need more information, to contact their school's administration or their teachers directly for the links to those virtual sessions. In terms of policy updates, I mentioned one earlier relative to changes with the records retention schedule. Of a more significant level, the New York State School Boards Association has recently published several recommended changes that, if school districts were seeking to expand its equity, diversity, and anti-racism programs, that school boards and districts consider for adoption. In some cases, those are slight changes to existing policies. But the New York State School Boards Association has also suggested that boards consider the adoption of a completely new, or what would be new for the Monticello Central School District policy on equity, inclusivity, and diversity. So I asked the board to recall a joint letter that was put out by the district, signed by board officers, the then superintendent, Dr. Bill Silver, and the heads of the administrators and teachers associations back in June, that called for the district to actively question our policies, procedures, and attitudes, looking for ways that we can reshape our institutional culture around an ethic of equity. This is critical work and will challenge the status quo, but we commit the district to becoming an anti-racist district. So what I am recommending at this stage is that the policy committee meet to begin initial reviews of those suggested changes by the New York State School Boards Association for consideration. These would be policy changes. These are not necessarily programs, though they might affect programs. But these are initial discussions that are in the board's purview relative to policy around equity, inclusivity, and diversity. So I'm recommending that the policy committee meet prior to our next board meeting, and I would suggest that we meet on November 5th at 5:30 p.m.
That's our regular scheduled policy meeting anyway. So policy members, please take note of that. That'll be a 5:30 meeting for us that evening.
Okay. And I will send those drafts that NYSBA has put out to the policy committee members prior to that. Any questions on my report?
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Evans. The enrollment information is there. Does anyone have any questions around enrollment for this meeting? Okay, moving on from there. Assistant Superintendent for Business. Ms. Fala, you're on.
Okay, so tonight it's a short list. You have your regular budget status, revenue status, claims audit report, and school lunch profit and loss for the months of July and August. So that catches us up. We're pretty busy in the month of August with the audit, so that's why you're getting two this month. And the final thing I have is the food safety plan. Our food service director asked that the board re-adopt the HACCP food safety plan, and it's updated for the emergency meals related to the COVID pandemic. So that's the change there.
Any questions for Ms. Fala? Okay, so moving on from there, anything, I know there's nothing specific on the agenda, but Dr. Ola Marks?
Yeah, the only thing I wanted to mention is, as everybody is aware, we wrote and adopted a DSIP plan, which is the District Comprehensive Improvement Plan. The other component of being a targeted district is the school plan. And I just received word today and guidance from New York State about the timeline for that. So we're going to be engaging in a needs assessment at the middle school and surveying, doing walkthroughs, and developing a school level plan, which will be presented to the board to address the targeted groups that did not meet adequate yearly progress.
Thank you. Any questions for Dr. Ola Marks? Okay, moving on from there, Mr. Crumley.
I move that we take action items T1 through T11 as a group.
Do we have a second to that? Made by Mr. Groden. Any discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? So ordered. Moving forward, Mr. Crumley.
I move that we approve action items T1 through T11 as a group.
Do I have a second? Made by Mr. Groden. Any discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? So ordered. Going into the closing portion of the meetings, there's no correspondence this past time. Questions and comments from the public? Anything from you, Mrs. Montez, that came in?
Nothing new.
Thank you very much. I know that this was a lengthy meeting, but it was a very heavy discussion around some very important subject areas that needed to be handled. I appreciate everyone being here. Again, any questions if you're watching this post, because we're now live on YouTube, so you can watch it, whenever. And we do have over 400 people watching on a regular basis. So that's more than we would ever get if we were actually live. So if you do have questions or anything, please don't hesitate to reach out to our board clerk. She will make sure that the questions are forwarded appropriately so that we can get them answered for you. Again, her email is jmontes@k12mcsd.net. We thank everybody for being here this evening. And for those of you who are West Wing fans, HBO Max tonight, the reunion episode. So go back and enjoy it if you're a West Wing fan from way back in the day. And other than that, it's good to see you all. Stay safe and always with Monty Pride. Thank you.
Good night, everyone.
Oh, are you gonna adjourn?
Yeah, I make a motion to adjourn.
I think we did. Todd and Helen were adjourned. So we have enough people still on the call. We're adjourned. We're good.